Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're decoding a totally mind-bending metaphysical puzzle together. We are stepping way back from the everyday mechanics of the physical world and asking the absolute biggest structural questions about existence itself. We're going to systematically break down some incredible source material that completely challenges how we think about the very boundaries of our universe. So get ready, because we're about to seriously stretch our conceptual muscles here.
So what is outside of reality? Seriously, just take a second right now and try to visualize it. I mean, most of us instinctively imagine this giant box containing the universe, right? And we try to picture whatever it is that's floating around out there in the dark outside that box. But what if the very concept of an outside is actually just a logical illusion? Well, today we're exploring a framework that suggests reality is this completely self-contained, self-explaining puzzle with absolutely no missing pieces.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the metaphysical ontology principle, the ultimate rule of the universe. Okay, the metaphysical ontology principle states that all relations, mappings, and functions relevant to reality are generated, defined, and parameterized within reality itself. Okay, I know, that is a massively dense academic mouthful, so let's translate that. This basically means reality is what the source material calls a closed descriptive manifold. Essentially, every single rule, description, definition, and property required to make the universe work is baked right into the universe itself. There is no external rulebook floating out there in the void. There's no outside programmer. Reality actually writes its own code, defining the parameters of its own existence entirely from the inside.
You know, this principle draws some pretty clear battle lines for existence. Consider inside reality. This is where everything descriptive, definitive, and explanatory actually lives. It's a completely close network of definitions and interpretations that constantly refer to one another just to create meaning. Contrast that with outside reality. It's not some mysterious, dark, empty void. No, it is strictly defined as nothing and completely irrelevant. If the system is totally closed, it means reality contains absolutely no critical gaps that leave any essential part of its structure unexplained. If you ever find yourself thinking there's a gap in the fabric of existence, well, the principle insists you just aren't looking deep enough inside the network.
Moving on to Section 2, reality as a closed loop. Let's look at the scale test thought experiment.
Okay, here is a challenge for you. Can you measure the universe from the outside? Imagine a hypothetical external scale for a second. Picture this massive cosmic ruler of distance stretching on infinitely, or maybe an absolute godlike stopwatch trying to define the exact age or size of the universe from somewhere beyond the universe itself. If an external measurement like that existed, would it actually mean anything at all to us?
Well, we are immediately faced with a logical paradox here. Think about it. If your cosmic ruler is actually relevant to reality, meaning it can interact with the physical universe, measure it, and give us a value that makes sense, then it must already be part of reality's intrinsic syntax. It's actually internal. On the flip side, if the scale is truly, genuinely external to the universe, it's not included in the syntax of reality at all. It becomes internally unrecognizable. It literally cannot interface with existence. So according to the text, the words external and irrelevant are strictly synonymous. There is simply no such thing as a real but external scale.
And this beautifully illustrates why the universe is, technically speaking, externally undefined when it comes to things like overall size and duration. There is no outside ruler. If any supposedly absolute scale ever became recognizable to us, it would just mean we've discovered a deeper relative layer of reality that the scale actually belongs to. Everything, at its absolute core, is explained as a relative function of the other ingredients in the mix. Because of this perfectly interdependent structure, the source describes the metaphysical ontology principle as a general principle of relativity.
Okay, Section 3. No gaps and no magic. Busting the ultimate fallacy.
You know, there's this really recurrent human fallacy that goes like this. The existence of the universe is given, and therefore in no need of explanation. I mean, have you ever heard someone argue this? People so often just throw their hands up and declare that the universe is just a given fact, full stop. Don't worry about it. But the source text vigorously points out a massive flaw here. The phrase "is given" is vastly incomplete. It leaves enormous, gaping holes in our logical understanding of existence.
Because saying something is given leaves all these hidden loose ends, we immediately have to stop and ask three essential questions. What is the source by which it is given? What is the means by which it is given? And what is the reason for which it is given? Remember our closed loop from earlier?
If this source, this means, and this reason are actually real components of existence, they absolutely must exist inside reality. The explanatory gap doesn't exist in the self-explanatory network of reality itself. It literally only exists in the limited mind of the person making the claim.
So, what happens if we just ignore those loose ends and stubbornly say the universe is totally inexplicable? Well, the source text uses this fantastic, kind of funny analogy. It says that claiming the universe has no fundamental basis of existence is basically like saying it popped out of the apron. You know, the infinite, formless void, with a spontaneity exceeding a magician pulling a magic rabbit out of a hat. Why exceeding? Well, as the text points out, even a magic trick actually requires a magician, right? And a hat to pull the rabbit from. If the universe truly has no internal explanation, it doesn't even have a magician or a hat. It would exist purely by impossible, unexplainable magic.
To avoid that whole absurd magic trap, the text offers the only truly logical alternative. Reality acts as its own bootstrap. Because it's a completely closed loop, reality is entirely responsible for its own structure. It serves as its own source, its own means, and its own reason for being. It essentially pulls itself up by its own cosmic bootstraps, constantly containing the means of its own composition and interpretation right there within the network. Absolutely nothing is borrowed from the outside.
And you know, this closed-loop logic gives us tremendous power to tackle the heaviest existential questions out there. For instance, why does this reality exist instead of some other reality? Now, that is a deep teleological question that has bothered philosophers for literally centuries. But because reality is a closed logical network, the principle demands that even these massive questions must have answers. They are logically meaningful levels of structure, so the answers have to exist, even if those answers are determined strictly by the closure criterion itself.
Which brings us to Section 4, Connecting Mind to Reality, the final puzzle piece.
Because really, what about the mind? It's a completely fair question to ask at this point, and it completely shifts our perspective. Up until now, we've been talking about the universe like it's this brilliant, self-sustaining automated machine. But an automated machine metaphor completely fails if you don't have an observer. This reality loop we've been building is mathematically and logically sound for sure, but as the text notes, it's strictly through our minds that we understand anything at all. A closed descriptive manifold is completely hollow if we don't acknowledge the very minds that are perceiving, recognizing, and interpreting it. Without the mind to process the syntax, the logical structure just has no audience. So the source leaves us with this really powerful correspondence. Quote, having equipped ourselves with a map, we now attend to the correspondence between the map and the terrain. We have the principle of closure now. We know reality defines itself, but we are the minds actually navigating that terrain. So if reality is a self-explaining loop, what exactly is your conscious role within it? Are our minds the very mechanism reality uses to recognize its own closed boundaries? Are you literally the universe looking back at itself? Definitely something to think about as you go about your day. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. And hey, keep questioning the terrain around you.